due diligence in relation to human rights and business is every step of a process from production to the retail store ensured that human rights is being complied with.
Well, this concept of human rights due diligence stems from the belief that the promotion of human rights is the responsibility of all sectors. It starts with the state protecting human rights and business having a responsibility to respect it.
It's a matter of getting businesses involved or making sure that they comply with existing laws. You also would like them to go beyond what is already mandated by law.
To make sure that you have mechanisms, you have judicial mechanisms, non-judicial mechanisms that will ensure the protection of these rights. And if these rights are violated, there must be remedies.
Creating harmony between business and human rights has been introduced in the past years and continues to be discussed in order to ensure that human rights are protected, fulfilled, and promoted in the workplace as well as in the host community of businesses. In the course of the discussions, the United Nations adopted what is now called the Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which promote protect, respect, and remedy framework. The guiding principles were developed by UN Secretary General, Special Representative Professor John Ruggie. It was officially adopted by the UN Human Rights Council in June 2011 and is the first human rights initiative on business responsibility endorsed by the United Nations.
The UN Guiding Principles talk about the obligations of the state to protect the rights of the individuals against, all entities, including businesses, which are private in nature. So it is the state's responsibility, that's the first pillar, to protect these rights. A second pillar would be to make sure that these rights that are really promulgated by law in place must be respected. The third pillar, of course, is if anything happens, of course, the remedies should take place.
The particular UN guiding principles was just introduced into the country early in the middle of last year, and it's the European Chamber that's promoting it within the business groups. So it's a work in progress. But I think in terms of acknowledging the responsibility, I think there's widespread acceptance. It's been embraced as a concept. The most specific activity that the business community has been actively pushing is what we're calling the Integrity Initiative. And while integrity may not sound like it is directly related to human rights, I think practicing business with integrity is also our way of promoting human rights.
There are many human rights abuses and violations in the areas of production, particularly in the extractive industries. In the Philippines, we're actually on a starting level. That means it is only now that a tripartite discussion, meaning the government, the business, and also civil society are coming together to discuss Ruggie's principles.
Even among us in Congress, so the challenge is trying to popularize what do you mean by business and human rights. But offhand, I can say that most important of all is you get business to comply with existing laws. And not just regulatory laws, but laws that mandate the protection of rights of your employees, for instance, or the community, the host community of that business.
But even as the UN Guiding Principles is the only global document that provides a framework to pursue harmony between business and human rights, sectors still have differing views about it.
In the Philippines, sometimes Ruggie principles are not enough because the principles themselves are voluntary. That is why civil society at the moment is pushing for an international binding treaty in the United Nations to make these companies accountable when they make extraterritorial investments, and at the same time to ensure that their national subsidiaries comply also with human rights.
It's not a choice between the UN Guiding Principles against a legally binding treaty. You have to use both the UN Guiding Principles in order to arrive at a legally binding treaty process.
We are cooperating with the European Chamber. Our focus, quite honestly, is the Integrity Initiative, but I said it really dovetails. It's really consistent with each other. MBC is very conscious of the need to promote human rights, poverty alleviation, inclusive growth. All of these things are things that are very high on the agenda of Makati Business Club.
In the advent of ASEAN economic integration, the region needs to take strides in ensuring that the states are able to protect human rights, businesses respect human rights, and that mechanisms for redress when violations occur are in place. While the guiding principles have produced results and inspired other related principles, including the Dhaka Principles for Migration with Dignity, the advocacy still has a long way to go. Today, there are strong global calls for states to adopt a binding treaty that would require more concrete measures and stricter implementation and accountability from states and the business sector. Clearly, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights are a good starting point for advocacy.
What's needed right now is for us to study what are the guiding principles of the United Nations when it comes to business and human rights, and also to be acquainted with the laws that we have passed, not just now but in previous Congresses that deal with human rights. Then we just exercise our oversight functions in making sure that these laws are being enforced. Also to have a preferential attention for the disadvantaged sectors in ensuring that their rights are being protected.
Government is primarily a duty bearer. It is the one that has obligations to protect, to respect, and to fulfill human rights. And in no way should it sacrifice any rights for the sake of profit.
The promotion of human rights is everybody's business. It cannot be the business of government alone. It cannot be the business of the private sector alone. We really have to collaborate. All segments of society have to come together. We each have a role to play. Government's role is essentially to protect human rights. The role of the business community is to show respect for it. And I think it's by working together and showing sincerity in the effort and really being sincerely concerned about uplifting the quality of lives of our people.
The challenge is for the people to know what their rights are, to organize themselves, and to be able to make sure that through their organization, they are able to assert their rights. Awareness raising is very important because awareness raising, both for all, company, the state, and the people, they have to be fully aware of the laws so that they make sure that these laws are complied with fully. I would like to express my appreciation to ICCO for its continuing advocacy in the promotion and propagation of the UN Guiding Principles and making sure that the people get to know what this is all about, because our globe is pretty big. We've got 4 continents and there's a lot of work to be done.
ICCO welcomes this bold move by government, business and civil society to come together to work towards common actions to strengthen the practice of human rights in the realm of doing business in this country.